Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream Podcast. My name is Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to invite Britt Klontz and Jaclyn Lambert. Hello to you both. This is our first two-person interview. I'm loving it.
Oh, really? Cool. Honored.
Yeah. We're gonna do Brady Bunch style, so this will be cool.
I've got one more. My dogs will join soon. They're on little squares.
Yeah,
No, I'm
nice.
kidding.
All right. The more
Yeah, we'll
merrier.
bring the pets out.
I'll have a square for just our little BuzzStream guy here.
Yes, he deserves his own square.
Well, listen, Britt and Jaclyn, if people listening don't know, they both run a fantastic podcast called We Earn Media Podcast. I have to say, I am not as caught up. I feel like I was on your podcast like 6 months ago or something, and I was telling how, I've listened to every episode. And since then, this job I got a new kid and I've fallen behind. So,
That's okay.
Don't quiz me on anything. But I highly recommend checking it out. You've interviewed people from all over the media landscape, Refinery 29, The Street, Adweek, TechCrunch, people from both sides, the journalists, people doing digital PR, national news, local news. So I thought it would be awesome to really dig into what you have learned, because We Earn Media Podcast has been around for a while, and both of you have been around in the space for a long time as well. You're both digital PR consultants on your own. So yeah, I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to really pick your brain and just dig into different aspects of the digital PR landscape.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. So let's start with some kind of basic, baseline sense of where the industry is. The kind of story I feel like that has been unfolding as the beginning of the year, I guess, and through kind of this crazy, tumultuous, Google time that we're living through here, is more people are gravitating towards digital PR and away from kind of more of the traditional link building side of things that I am seeing on our end. So there's people coming into it who don't really know about digital PR. They know what PR is, but kind of bridging that gap is a little tough. And then the other side, it seems like there's a lot of journalists who are getting laid off. I've heard, even through your podcast, there are a lot of people who, journalists that work at publications, who aren't necessarily writing as much as they'd like about stories they're getting pitched, or they're splitting some of their time with more of the SEO driven articles and things that are going to make the publications money. So it feels like there's this divergence, with all these new people into digital PR. Journalists are getting slammed with more and probably worse pitches, right? And there's fewer journalists to go around, or fewer slots for stories, maybe I should say, to go around. So would you agree with that? Jaclyn, do you want to comment on that first?
Oh, yeah. I mean, literally, Britt and I were literally having this conversation just yesterday when we were talking about the state of things. Yeah, I would say that I've seen many changes that I think, if I'm to be honest, I'm still trying to piece together what all those changes mean and how it all works together. But what I'm noticing with my own work is, and I think this is a byproduct of people being laid off, is that newsrooms are running leaner than ever before. So yes, there are fewer people to pitch. And then what we're seeing with media acquisitions, so a lot of local newspaper and TV, they're owned by few corporations, and we're seeing a lot of the growth of syndication networks. A good example that I could share really quick, I collaborated recently with Fox Business, and not only did it take, which I know we're going to get to follow-ups, it took more follow-ups than I was comfortable sending, but I really needed to get a win. It ended up getting passed on to someone else within the team because my contact was too busy. And then on top of that, once they shared it through Fox Business, they ended up utilizing the story 2 more times with Fox News Digital, and then they syndicated it out to their entire local affiliates, to which if you go to any Fox News affiliate, they repurpose the stories for all their local things. And so it's one of those things where I think the wins are getting fewer and further between, but if you do get one, it's almost like this big snowball effect. And then the second thing I'm noticing, which I talked about with Britt, is it seems like these mid-sized publishers are definitely being affected by Google and these changes. I think we are all familiar with that House Fresh article that came out saying that their website was basically hidden by Google recently, and they've had to, they basically don't exist on Google anymore. I'm finding on my own work that there used to be these mid-sized publishers that I could send them anything and they would be so hungry for content and publish. And now it's almost like crickets, to where I think they're being a little more cautious about what they're willing to share and write about. So that's what I'm seeing on my end. But yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, big time. Britt, anything else to add to that? I know you were talking about this.
Yeah. What else to add? I think digital PR, with all of the factors that you mentioned, Vince, I think there's a greater emphasis on data-driven insights, personalization, multimedia content, commentary. It's a big one that I'm working with a lot recently on behalf of clients. I think just to provide some positive outlook here, I think despite those challenges, the demand for quality content and expert commentary does persist. I think what Jaclyn said about the lead time is so true right now. Like, wins are taking longer. We're in a time right now. It's July 17th. Not sure when this is going to publish, but it's, the election season is upon us. There's tons of news in the news cycle, though, outside of that. And I say within the last year, especially, so many journalists have let me know that like another story has come up that they need to jump on. And what I'm pitching is not as time sensitive. So it's going to be a couple more weeks. And that's even if they let me know. But yeah, just to echo what Jaclyn said, the lead time is very long. Jaclyn, my interviewer brain is on right now. And I'm so sorry, Vince, but I have a question for Jaclyn, actually, if that's okay, too, about what she said.
Yeah, of course.
Jaclyn, you mentioned you've followed up with somebody at Fox News more than you were comfortable. I know that's a question I believe, Vince, you had on your list as well, but like, how many times did you follow up with that person out of curiosity? I was just thinking about follow-ups this morning, so it's on top of mind for me.
Yeah, I love this question. I'm a conservative follow-upper because, as our podcast guests have many times told us, we only really need one follow-up. If you don't hear from us, we're really not interested. But Britt and I have also talked about how there's exceptions to every rule. And so my contact at Fox News, he's a producer. He had tipped off to Miranda, my expert that was doing a video with him, that he's hungry for migration studies, which is exactly what I had. So I knew there was a good fit. So I followed up twice, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, that is a lot. And yeah, I don't know what kind of visuals you pair off with this, but I can always send you like a little screenshot because I shared it with my client. The response to the second follow-up was, please follow up with me again on Monday because I'm just way too swamped, but I do want to revisit this. So really, even if you want to count that, then I did follow up 3 times, I guess. But yeah, it was worth it, right? So it's always good to take a chance.
To get it, right? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's dig into that a little bit because, I like you brought up the point. There's always the exception to the rule. So I heard you mention this contact was a producer, right? So is it different? Do you take different tactics for different people at a news outlet, like a editor versus a whatever, a producer or a whoever?
Yeah. I was just thinking about this. I was working on a story yesterday about, I like to use examples. So working on a moving scams study, there are many angles that could be pitched around this study. One angle that I identified was a consumer finance segment around the money lost from moving scams and how to avoid that. And so from that was a specific pitch that I sent only to producers at news outlets that were TV based. The pitch that I was sending out to online media, so think like CNBC Make It or Fox Business, they're more interested in the stats heavy approach. And so one pitch, the one to producers, I really stressed, to Britt's point, this idea that we had an expert that could provide commentary, that could speak on camera. And I even included example clips so they could see that we're ready to go for camera, which would meet their goals for a story if they wanted to pursue that. Meanwhile, with the CNBC, I stressed that we had an expert, but really it was the key stats that were more important. So yeah, it does matter, I think, how you format the email, depending on who you're reaching out to.
Yeah. What about you, Britt? How does that?
Yeah, I would agree. Jaclyn pretty much covered everything that I would say. And then did you ask about follow-ups too, or am I just making this up?
No, I mean, I think that's all part of it, right? That was kind of what kicked this off, is like the different strategies. So yeah, I think follow-ups definitely fit within that. Like, because there's probably people
Yeah.
at a news desk who are more busy than others, right? Like a producer might be pulled on to different things rather than
Yeah.
a typical editor. But have you found that is the case, Britt?
Yeah, definitely. I tend to try to follow up only once, unless I notice someone's opening my email quite a few times. But when I do follow up, I tend to always have something of value to offer up, and always avoid just following up for no reason, if that makes sense.
Yes. So
So it's less about the job title and more about that
yeah,
standard rule that I approach it with. But go ahead.
yeah, that
Sorry,
makes sense.
Vince.
And you, well, you mentioned like one of the things I used to think about is, like you said, if the person's opened the email a million times, like obviously email open, that's like something that BuzzStream does, like to track that kind of thing. But email opens are so misleading and can be very misleading. But there are times when, if you see one of these emails got opened, 40 times or something, I feel like there's some like happy medium of like this noisy open data where it's like, if it's like 100 times, then it's probably an error. But if it's like, 20 or 30, like maybe they actually are interested in it and keep coming back to it. So there's probably some types of trigger or factors in there that you can lean on. I want to dig into a little bit, kind of step back, because I know you both have done all kinds of different campaigns. You've already brought up a few different ones, Jaclyn. So like, let's talk a little bit about content ideation, especially these days when we know that people are very busy. There's fewer people, fewer ideas to go around. Britt, can you talk to me a little bit about, I like to do this under the guise of like what you both have learned too from We Are in Media podcast as well, but like what you've learned about finding ideas that resonate with different journalists in an industry.
Yeah. What specific questions do you have about that before I go into a random rabbit hole?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just let's start with just, how do you find something that's going to be a specific fit for a journalist? Like, if you are you starting with an idea? Let's do it this way. Are you starting with an idea, or are you starting with a journalist or, a piece of coverage that you want to get from CNBC or something?
Ooh, that's a really good question. It's like that phrase, did the chicken come before the egg or vice versa? Right? Isn't that a thing? I'm like
Yes, that's a
constantly
thing.
I'm just like constantly reading journalists in the different areas or industries that my clients are related to. So I think in the back of my mind that I'm kind of doing a mix of both at all times. I will say, I think understanding what journalists want is the most important job of a PR. So I'm always following their published articles. I'm on social media looking to see what they're sharing. If you're not on social media, I'm not saying you need to post on social media, but I think what's really helped me in the last couple of years is following journalists who are active on social media, especially LinkedIn, and especially those who have Substacks in which are newsletters where they share what stories they're working on. That's like an inside look into the brain of a journalist. And I try to take as much time as I can every day. Sometimes it's only 30 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. And I'm reading the stories that they're publishing. And I'm trying to figure out how I could tie my own clients into those stories. I'm also just checking out like Google Trends. I use BuzzSumo to keep on top of other topics related to the clients that I have, to see what's trending. I'm not going to be on top of everything. I'm a human being, but those tools in particular help me. And yes, I am given ideas from my clients, and I do have to sometimes work with those ideas only. But I find that clients who are more give me the creative freedom to come up with my own ideas first, show the best results. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's probably like this divergent approach, and it's maybe like a mindset thing when you're coming at the digital PR or regular PR, where it's kind of this emphasis on quantity of coverage versus quality of coverage. And the workflow you just outlined to me, Britt, seems to be that you're spending a lot more time coming up with quality pitches, quality ideas, and not as concerned about, I'm going to send out 1,000 emails to 1,000 different people, and this thing's gonna go viral. It's more about like really thoughtful approach to this. Jaclyn, do you have any response to that? Like, yeah, I see you nodding your head. I mean, is that kind of your thought?
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I would add is if you did want to incorporate quantity to your quality, you can think about subtopics within the content that you're creating in order to come up with more angles to pitch. And so I think that's why something like a geographical focused study is so popular, because if you do have data for all 50 states, then that's your way of still having quality stories without blasting thousands of emails. In my opinion, right? It takes a long time to do outreach to all of those 50 states, but I think a good, solid approach would be to think about all those angles and then have quality stories around each of those angles. But yeah, I mean, what Britt says is exactly how I approach. And the only thing I would add is, depending on what your goals are. So if you're focusing on like data-driven content, perhaps you're consuming the content that the people you are wanting to work with are producing, and seeing what other people are producing and how you can kind of recreate it for your industry. And then the other approach that I'm thinking about is I think what a lot of people call newsjacking. To me, that's just what good publicists do, is just keeping track of what actually is newsworthy and can my client speak to that. So it's not always about content. It could be, as Britt said, commentary, can be interviews, because that's, to me, just as valuable, and it could be a great use of your time as an outreacher.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. And Britt, I'd like to hear from you too. But it sounds like within the toolkit, the digital PR toolkit, let's say, there's like the content driven, you do a data study. There's maybe, some interactive piece. You mentioned commentary, where you're finding something that's going on and pitching commentary, newsjacking, or whatever you want to call it, reactive PR. What else am I missing?
Well, there's also like just exploring other channels. So podcasts, pitching people to be a podcast guest comes to mind. Sometimes there's PR for different events. Gosh, we could go in so many different directions. I've seen a lot of folks doing more influencer-driven PR, which is just fascinating to me. I don't get to do that much, but that's something else that I know a lot of digital PRs are doing right now.
Yeah, Jaclyn, anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's a pretty wide net. I like that you mentioned the podcasting, Britt, because I know that you've talked about it a bit on LinkedIn as well. And I think it's a good use of time. I keep saying that because I think with outreach, it's no secret that you get ignored a lot of rejections. So I love a good tactic that actually results in more responses per email, so to speak, per batch of emails. Does that make sense?
Right. It makes you feel like you're moving the needle.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly.
There's also just more traditional PR things too, like setting up a contributor column at very niche trade publications. That's another thing that I think, some people might refer to that as guest posting. I wouldn't, But
I wouldn't either. That's a
Yeah,
good
it's kinda,
tactic.
like more refined. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's another way. Gosh, there's so many avenues of digital PR. And that's why I think I like it. It's never a dull moment.
No.
Yeah, I think let's talk about this a little bit more too, because it's tough in an agency sense, I know, to do something like this versus maybe as a consultant, you maybe feel a little more free to kind of use all the tactics at your disposal. Whereas with an agency, it's often, we have our set, we're going to give you 2 pieces of content, or we're going to, over the course of the next quarter, we're going to get you however much coverage. And maybe that's just a very myopic view from, my own experience, but digital PR for you both, and I'll ask each of you, is it more opportunistic, or are you building out, like, I know this strategy is going to work for this person. I know this person's going to be, he's an expert, so he's going to be, I want to pitch guest contributors, get them on podcasts. Or is it like, let's just throw everything out of the wall and see what sticks? Like, we want to get as much coverage as we can. Britt, I'll let you go first for this one.
Well, it's so funny. You're reminding me of, I just kind of want to start here. Like when I was at Distilled and I was, set in that box, like, here is a piece of content. I'll never forget when this happened. It was like a light bulb moment went off where I felt like Barbie in the Barbie movie. Yes, I'm obsessed with this movie, and I'll use any instance I can to relate it or tie it into something that I'm talking about. But when she just realizes, like, there's more to life, and I'm sitting there and I'm promoting this content piece for a sporting goods company, and I'm pitching it to like I think it was travelandleisure.com, and I really wanted this person, she was a travel writer, to talk about this piece of content where I think we mapped out, like, can't even remember what content it was. I think it was about the changing seasons and when is the best time to visit some place. And she was like, I'm not going to write about this right now, but you reached me at the right time because I'm looking for an expert who can talk about hiking boots. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this sounds so easy. But then I had to go to my manager and, throw this crazy idea, but it wasn't crazy at all. It's traditional, it's PR. That we needed somebody from that sporting goods company to just share some commentary on what they think is how to find the right hiking boots for whatever hike it was. And luckily, the stars aligned and I made it happen. And the journalist featured that person's commentary. And that was kind of like, a light bulb moment. Like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to PR than promoting content. And Vince, remind me of your question, because now I'm just back in my head about agency stuff. But what was your original question again?
No, I guess my original question was just, like how you think about that kind of strategically. And
okay.
Fitting a
that's a good question
to a tactic.
Yeah,
you did it. You answered it.
Yeah.
So
I think you did
that's
answer
how, I think I would think about it strategically even today. If a client from a sporting goods company or a lead from a sporting goods company came to me and they wanted to get coverage, we could create content. We could use an expert. It all depends on the availability of that expert. Sometimes I might be able to draft commentary on behalf of that expert. I mean, if it's about something like healthcare, or I have my limitations, sometimes I can draft some commentary, quickly have the review it, and it speeds the process up a bit. Now I'm getting totally in the weeds. But it's a more like holistic way of looking at things now, being on my own. Jaclyn, would you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely. I had to answer the question that you asked, Vince. I also had a light bulb moment as well. So my training was in traditional PR, so that's what I went to college for. But my first job after all the fun internship stuff was at an SEO firm where I met Britt, actually. I don't know why I'm swinging this pen around. Let me put it down. That'll be fun for the listeners. Anyway, so my career blossomed into this content-based way of doing things. I went freelance and I had a client, Student Loan Hero, who they hired me because they wanted links. They didn't know how to do it. I'm like, well, I know how to do it. So I get on and then there's just like nothing going on and they're not creating content yet for link building. We were in a startup phase. And so they were like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, we got to create some content. So, but that took time, right? We didn't do that on day one. And so we kind of experimented with some things, did more of like, I think what people would consider more traditional link building, where I had a resource page and I was trying to do outreach around that. Full disclosure, it's not my cup of tea. I don't think I did very well with that. But I think I probably started answering Haro requests, so help a reporter out, which is not as popular anymore. In fact, they're gone. But there's Quoted is the new tool that people are loving right now. But we started answering media queries and started finding Andy, our CEO. He had an interesting story, right? And so if we're to zoom out, it's really about good storytelling is what we're trying to provide these reporters and producers, regardless of what their actual goal is. And so it really opened my eyes to the possibilities. So yeah, I really love in-house teams that we were able to do a lot because I had access to, when we started growing, I had access to a full content team. I had access to our marketing director. I had access to business development, and we could all work together for the same goal, which I found that being in an agency, it felt more like I was in a silo. Like I was there to reach this one goal, but I was unclear about how that fit into the larger strategy. So then as a freelancer, that's the way I like to work. Just like Britt said, holistically. I'm on the Slack channels of a couple of my clients. We interact and we talk, and I get to have access to those people that allowed me to do my job better. And yeah, it really is, you show up, you talk to a client, you find out what their business goals are and what they're trying to get out of outreach. And that can be very telling about then what you can do in order to create a strategy for digital PR that makes sense. And so it might be content based, but I have some clients that are more so just looking for TV appearances. And so what they want is very different than what an SEO focused client wants. And we just kind of go from there.
Yeah, great answer, both of you. And it sparks something here that I'm curious if somebody comes to you both, as you're both consultants, PR consultants. When people come to you with PR in mind, are they less concerned about the number of links and like those types of metrics and organic traffic and more concerned about the brand and getting their brand out and building their brand? Talk a little bit about that difference, because I know now both of you, Jaclyn, I didn't really know that background with you, so it sounds like both of you have kind of similar background as me, and like so coming at this with that SEO background and having those aha moments, do you see that there is a big difference between the way that clients approach this and like what they get out of it?
So I think the goal with the clients that I take on, the goal is to get coverage, to get their brand out there, whether it's a thought leader in the company, whether it's a product, whether it's a content piece, depends on the client. And yeah, it depends on the goals as well. I'd say when I first started doing consulting, I had put myself in a bit of a box and niched down and was strictly doing content-led PR. And when that was the case, my success was tied to number of coverage placements. Now, 4 years on, almost 5, I am happy and relieved and proud to say that those are no longer the goals. I take on clients for ideally long-term. We are working on various aspects of their marketing. Similarly to what Jaclyn said, like looped in on all types of content that they're creating and thinking about how we can leverage that content, but also what kind of PR or marketing or content, whatever it might be, I can do on my end to also lend itself nicely to the content that they're creating for various aspects of the business. So
Yeah,
it's
very well
changed a
said.
lot.
Yeah. Right. Jaclyn, how about you?
Oh, good question. It really depends on the client. my one client that is not so SEO focused, it really is about the brand exposure. And so she would rather get on national news than a lot of little local websites. She still wants the link juice, if that makes sense. So when we do get a placement, she wants to be linked back. But it is definitely more of a quality over quantity. And the reason why is she gets referrals directly from some of the placements that we produce, which is really cool. Her line of work, she's a lawyer. So a podcast appearance for her is worth a lot, because if the podcast has a lot of good listeners, she will report back to me that she's had listeners reach out to her about her services. So for her, that's like a direct tie to the value. Now, the other client I keep talking about, the SEO focused one, I have other clients, but these are the two that I work with the most. So this is why I keep talking about. And it's cool because they're so opposite. The one that was focused more on SEO used to be more about the numbers, but as things have been changing and evolving, they're starting to look more at the quality number. And so I've been encouraged to focus more on TLD, so total linking domains, more so than number of placements. So they're kind of curious about variability now. The other thing that they've tipped off to me is they're starting to notify me of when we're getting more referral traffic. And then we're kind of digging into where that referral traffic is coming from. And so now they're looking at this from a more holistic standpoint, which is music to my ears. I think it should have always been like this, but I'm glad that it's going. So kind of a mix of both. I think quality over quantity, but both are nice when it works. It works,
Yeah. I mean, do you, this is probably a loaded question and I'll ask each of you, but Jaclyn, let's start with you. I mean, do you think digital PR serves SEO, or should digital PR serve brand, or should it serve SEO, or both? No wrong answer here. I'm just kind of curious where you stand. Like, are you leaning in one direction more than another?
Both. My background is, as much as I try to just distinguish myself from SEO, I like being productive with my time. I keep talking about that. If I know that my work is going to impact SEO positively, then I'm going to keep that in mind. And so that informs a lot of, I know we talked about ideation already, but like relevancy, for instance, is very important to me, because I know that if we're getting placements that are relevant to what this client is, helps fund this client to keep existing, makes the business run, then of course I'm going to focus on that. And I mean, the student loan, I know it's been years. Student Loan Hero got acquired in I think it was 2018. But if you ask Andy, the CEO, who made millions of dollars off of this, what were some of the key aspects to getting acquired, he would point to the fact that we had a really robust digital PR team. So when we all got acquired, it's sad to say, but half of the team got let go. But one of the teams that stayed was the entire digital PR team. And I think that's telling of a lot of things. And so one last thing, and I'll let all of this go. One of the nice things about being in-house is I was able to work with our analytics person, and he ran what was called a correlation analysis. And we looked at backlinks fill over the last year. And we looked at it on two levels. Number one was on the URL level. Or URL level. And then the secondary was on the overall website level. And we wanted to answer the question, does building a direct link to the money page create better rankings and more traffic for the money page? Or does links overall impact the website overall? It's kind of a heady question. What we're trying to get at is like, do I need to build links to the page that makes money? Or do I just need to build links for the actual website? We did not find a strong correlation with specific money pages when looking at how many links were built to that money page, but we did find a strong correlation to the links pointing back overall. So what we found is the stronger our backlink portfolio became, the more we were able to build rankings, and they found a strong correlation to it. Now, obviously, it's all a big black hole, and I'm sure many SEO people would be like, that's not the right way to even analyze that. But I think there's a reason why digital PR is such a sought after skill that people in the SEO industry want. So it would be, I think it would be silly to discount it and say that we don't have an impact. But the branding aspect is interesting to me. And I know Britt knows a lot more about that side of it. And it's something that I would like to explore as the internet is changing everything, right? Because I think now more than ever, us people like Britt and I, we really need to understand what other value we bring to the table outside of that. So Britt, please talk to us about branding, if you don't mind.
Well, so this question, or I guess I have a story to share that will help answer this question too. So I had a client who was in the mortgage space and got them featured in Fortune magazine. They even had a .com
Congrats
in their name,
That's huge.
But Fortune magazine didn't link back. It's literally said the name with a .com and no link. And it killed me. It crushed me because I know the value of a link. And I knew that this client would be like, oh no, like would understand that feeling as well. However, there is so much value in that placement, right? There's so much value. And I have a template like in my Google Docs where it's just paragraphs of why it's still valuable. So
love that.
It's something I constantly refer to because clients are like, oh, this is great, but there's no link. And it crushes me, it kills me because there's so much that goes into that. And you should look at it for the value that it brings beyond the link. There's tons of value. I can go into the value now, but I will say I'm going to throw a really slimy promotion plug here, promotional plug. I recorded an episode for this podcast that I do called Digital PR Explains, where I mention the value of a media placement beyond backlinks. And it goes into branding, the value of branding. It goes into value behind, like, if you are a company or a startup who's trying to raise money, trying to get funding, or maybe you're at the point where you're trying to get acquired. All of these placements, if there's not a link, the investors, they're not going to care. They're going to look at where you're getting mentioned. And if it's in Fortune magazine, that's huge. So you're going to want to, in those instances, I always encourage my clients to put that on their website, to shout about it from the rooftops, like write a newsletter about it, post it on your social media channels. There's so much value in getting a placement, even if there's not a link. And I'm going to hop off of my stoop now because I can just go on and rant about this and bore you to death. But yeah, there's a whole episode where I talk about the value. It's like 8 minutes long. And yeah, I think, Jaclyn, you're so right. Like, we just got to start thinking more about the value that we bring as digital PRs beyond the value of a backlink. I think from an SEO perspective, of course, even if there's not a backlink, there's still value. Search engines are going to recognize your brands, like the mention itself. And this is my personal belief. Like you said, Jaclyn, there's a black hole. I believe there's something, Rand Fishkin also talks about this too, how search engines still notice that mention and the relevancy, especially if it's a site like Fortune magazine. But even if it's a trade publication that's very relevant to your business, it goes a long way in the eyes of Google and rankings, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I agree. One of the clients that I work with that is more SEO based, their analyst in the SEO team that they have has started to include mentions as part of their metric. So now we're not defining it by backlink anymore. We're defining it by placement. And so you can think of media placement as anywhere that you were mentioned or links to right? And yeah, I agree. There's a lot of, I know there's some argument on both sides, but there's definitely literature to suggest that mentions do count in SEO terms as well as branding.
Yeah, I think the recent Google leak really shed some light into that. And I think maybe that's what you're referring to, Britt. Rand, brought up a lot of those instances in the documentation that do talk about relevancy and how, yeah, it might be that unlinked mentions do serve as some type of signal for Google. But yeah, I mean, the things that people don't talk about, I think it's like direct traffic, right? Like every SEO is so caught up in organic traffic, obviously, because search engine, it's in the name, but I think if you're discounting all of those external other metrics outside of just organic traffic, then you're missing a lot of value there. So I totally agree. And the other thing I would say too that I'm thinking as you were both talking about this is, with AI overviews, we don't know what is going to actually come of this. Google rolled them out, rolled it back out, or pulled it back, but what we're seeing, I think, early on is mentions of brands that aren't in the top 10. They just have something unique to say, right? So the more you can kind of get your brand out there for all different reasons in all different, tactics, be it guest posting, podcasting, whatever, expert commentary, linked or unlinked, I think feeding that large language model, feeding the corpus of information that Google has, like that to me sounds like digital PR branding, a perfect goal there.
Nicely said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we're kind of running short on time here, but I want to take a little bit of the time to talk a little bit about kind of tactical advice that you both have for, I feel like a lot of my podcasts, I'm going to step back here. A lot of my podcasts, I talk about agencies, right? And people doing, in-house people working, but my mindset has always been like a bigger brand, right? Like someone working for a site and a bigger brand. And a lot of the times I get emails from people who are very small brands. It's one or two people working. It's the person that owns it who's writing, writes back to my newsletter and says like, hey, I like you wrote about guest blogging, but I don't even know where to start, and so there's certain aspects of this that I'm realizing are way far over people's heads just because the way that we think about it. So that's why I'm trying to drill down to some of the tactical advice that we can give to anybody. So let's get into some little stuff. We'll try to hit these like quick pitches. So Britt, let's start with subject lines. What is your main advice for catching a journalist's eye when you're pitching a product? Or sorry, pitching anything, I should say.
These days, I like to craft headlines, and I like to look at the headlines that the journalist is writing themselves to help inspire the subject line that I send to that particular journalist. That's one tactic that I've found a lot of success in recently, and I'm noticing myself do more often than I used to.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, Jaclyn, let's go to, so personalization is a big thing. I just wrote a big article about it. I think there's a big dichotomy or whatever you want to say, divergence between the thinking in this. And it's, if you're writing to a journalist, do they even care? If you've read their article, their recent articles, if you like it, if you have something unique to say, do they care about that? Or are they just so time poor that they just, they're seeing your pitch, that it might even just be the subject line that they're looking for because they're getting so many articles a day pitched to them. How much personalization do you do? Do you recommend it?
I do recommend some form of personalization, but I am time poor in the sense that if I did it to every single email, I wouldn't send as many. So I think looking at the deeper reason as to why you personalize, and it's to demonstrate that you did research on them and that you're helping them reach their goal of their coverage, right? And so I think you can do that through the angles and content that you pitch and being very forward about why it's a good fit for them. That said, if I see that there's somebody who's really valuable that I really want to work with, I might not have something for them that I'm pitching, but I want to make the connection. I definitely will go the route of sending an email and letting them know I liked their article or their segment and here's why, and introducing myself. I don't think that happens enough in this world. I think it's almost too much ideas in one email. If you go through all that and then try to pitch them content, why not do the intro early on and get your name out there first? And then when you're down to like pitching the actual content, they already might recognize your name, and you're showing that you've thought about them, you know their coverage, and this is what you're offering. So that's my take.
Yeah, love that. Britt, let's get your take on this too, because I know this is something that a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, so similarly, I don't typically personalize an email to a journalist. I think the key part of pitching is to, like Jaclyn said, tie the right story to the right journalist. And as long as you're doing that, you're going to be less likely to go into their spam folder and be ignored. They might not run with your story, but I think after the experience we've had talking to journalists through We Earn Media, 9 times out of 10, they're going to recognize your name the next time you pitch them, because potentially the first time you pitch them with a story that is directly relatable to the beat or what they might be covering, you're increasing your chances of getting a response and potentially getting them to cover your story the next time you reach out to them. So I do agree with Jaclyn. Like, if you can go out of your way and build that relationship in a personal way or a more friendly way and show that you're reading your work, you can do that on social media too. It doesn't have to be an email. Like, you could just go out of your way to share their stories. Journalists love that. Journalists take note of that. Like, I think that's the biggest compliment you could give to a journalist. So that's another thing to build upon what Jaclyn said. But I do know some PRs who, like, the relationship aspect is their bread and butter. Like, they will go out of their way to take note of when that person's birthday is, and that is super personal. Like, they will remember what that person talked about, like, when it comes to their kids' birthdays, what recitals or activities their sports or their kids do. Like, that's a whole nother. I applaud PRs like that. There are so many PRs who take that route. And I think that, unfortunately, like, this is me going in a rabbit hole here, but I think link builders gave that aspect of PR like a bad rep for a little bit. And I think we should take it back. I think their relationship building is important. And if you do it the right way and not a spammy way, then it does leaps and bounds for your career.
Can I mention something really quick related to that?
Yeah.
I learned about that in PR school. I remember.
I love that.
I remember specifically we had PR school. I remember this class, we had PR writing, and we spent like a day practicing like pretend pitches. And that was one of the things that they told us, is that it's not really quite like this, but idealized in PR school, they'd say, well, you get to know a journalist and you would ask them like how they're doing, how their kids are, how they're, like, and so it's funny. Like, I think the thing that peeves me off about the SEO industry, and maybe you put this on LinkedIn, I don't know if this is going to be like offensive or not, but I think like there's people in the SEO industry who think this stuff is like novel, but it's existed for years. We're just taking traditional tactics and utilizing them for maybe more modern goals, but it's always been like this. I think what sucks is when it gets turned into this like sneaky tactic, and journalists are smart. If you learn about a fun new tactic that's being blogged about on an SEO blog, guarantee you there's like 50 to 100 people trying the exact same thing on the exact same day at the same time. And yeah, you're gonna get caught out, or you might get called out even if it's not in front of you, like people know. So just keep that in mind. Be genuine.
Yeah, that is, I think, a great message, and we should probably end on that. It's, there's other people on the other side of these emails is kind of the message I try to give people. And it's like, if you're treating them with respect and doing the work to understand who they are and what they write about, like that, I think is kind of your point, is that's the personalization that you need, right? And the more we can build these relationships and stop thinking about it as how do we scale this, the more we're going to get some of that back, some of that good faith back from journalists, because I do feel that way, as coming from the more of a link builder perspective. It's link builders are, and I see it myself as a I work at BuzzStream. I get pitched all the time, and they're unrelevant pitches, or irrelevant pitches. And yeah, I understand now the plight of the journalist. Well, Britt, Jaclyn, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I feel like we have to have like a round 2 of this, and we can dig
Let's do it.
deeper into some of those rabbit holes. But if everybody listening here, and I forgot to mention this earlier, please like and subscribe. The more that you comment and share this kind of stuff, the more I can have great guests like Britt and Jaclyn on, and we can spread their message and this message of goodwill in the digital PR community. And you can follow Britt and Jaclyn. They're both very active on LinkedIn. Britt's website is vadacommunications.com. And I'll put all this in the show notes. Jaclyn is jaclynlambert.com. They both have the podcast We Earn Media, which is awesome. I highly recommend checking it out. And Britt, you mentioned your one-off series, Digital PR Explained. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
You got
great.
it.
And that's
Digital PR
a
Explained.
newer series that Britt has been. They're kind of like quick hits. They're great. Highly recommend checking those out too. So thank you both so much for your time. And like I said, this I think is the beginning. I think we're gonna have to have you on more, and stay
Aw,
tuned for
that'd
the
be
next
great.
episode with Britt and Jaclyn.
Thanks, Vince. Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.
All right, take care. Thanks for watching.